Okay, the essential reason why here today we are trying to like industrialize certain areas of the nation, or we were trying to develop other parts of the creation, is because there's not enough galvanized areas where we can actually do these, right? Fragmentations and fractures within certain objects in certain areas of the nation, we can't really go for, right? The people that survive, it doesn't really, the people that suffered, right? It doesn't really matter because they survived. Because that's one thing to keep in mind. And they were not very careful of the duple post. When they had the duple post, they didn't necessarily know to like, say go to a certain area, right? There's like these transportational like situations where one and another can't really like be inclined to do some sort of thing. It's kind of difficult, right? I think we all can agree on that. But then you have situations where like, say there's something extinguishable, right? You have an extinguishable issue where there's just a certain cause and a certain thing, and when you have like certain issues like these, it's kind of hard to deal with. See, leather and leather's another good example. Like you viewer, I want to ask the viewers a question right now. Like viewers, when you like go outside, right? When you like go for a walk or whatever, like you do realize, like you see many like complex like transactions, right? And many like business enterprises, interventions, and all that, right? You see all these things, and you look at these things. You're like, I want to be inclined with these things. So that's what I'm bringing to you today. Like, say we take like pith balls and stuff like that. Like pith balls in these certain areas, it's kind of hard to imagine in some certain ways. Because like, okay, for an example, like neuron transmitters, right? Things that they're in South Africa currently, right? I'm sure we all heard about the South African Civil War. Currently, the Algerians in South Africa are fighting a war with, I believe it was like the Israelis or something. Anyway, that's happening in South Africa, and they're currently going to invade the neighboring country of Bolivia. But in Bolivia, another thing to note in Bolivia is that the fuel reserves there are not that large. However, considering Bolivia is a developing nation, it can actually be industrialized within these resources. And we also have to take another thing into account here, like sugar concepts in these certain areas, right? They can't necessarily be indulged in certain areas of these certain areas. So what we can do with these projects, though, what we can do with these industries, we can use them for a better cause. We can take these industries and we can actually make them like work with the actual things. We can actually like be inclined to do something else. Say the certain color of a certain investment, a certain industrialized nation. Say we're to take say to take the color of a certain object, right? Or they were certain to eat something different, and that one thing they eat was not necessarily healthy, right? It's not poisonous to say per se, but the certain like dye in it, the certain like infection in it, something's wrong with it, right? Which leads me to my next point, like why like silk shops, they can't make clothes properly because of these issues, right? When like silk shops they try to make like cars, right? They're not really that good at it because silk shops are not known for making cars, but then. People see this, right? Like train companies, subway companies, they take this info, and when they take this info, they actually make more projects, they actually make more investments to go within these areas. And when they do that, people who drive Ford F-150s, they actually take this into account. People that do that are actually genuinely, interesting people, right? Because they actually like know like the benefit of what would happen. But say like a proxy war. I think we all know what a proxy war is. A proxy war happening in certain areas cannot necessarily be indulged in certain areas. Proxy wars can be indulged like certain things, right? Like, again to say about duple posts. Like duple posts, another thing within these proxy wars, it's kind of complicated to like know what's happening, right? Because there are so many different things happening within these areas. It's kind of like difficult to know, right? Like for example here, like you see these two different shades of blue right here. This is an example of ionic bonding, right? When I say that, like what I necessarily mean like imagine you're looking at like a paper, right? When you're looking at that paper, when you think you see the paper, man, why isn't like in the year 1970, why would like the province of Sichuan like actually build like more factories, right? Why wouldn't they do that? Because like everyone realized, right? Like based on that observation, we can actually make a better observation right here. Like another thing, for example, I'm trying to think something off the top of my head, right? Like the fracturation. Fracturation is another thing to keep in mind. When people don't fracture things properly, things can actually get bad. There can be many problems when they do this. Like, say for example, like in situations like nations such as like Senegal. In Senegal, what they actually do, they have lots of reserves of actually natural found potassium. With this potassium, they can actually do quite a lot. But like, say Banana Republic nations like Costa Rica, Honduras, Panama. These nations actually have quite a lot of resources and plantations to actually do stuff with these resources. Also, another thing to keep in mind, it's very important, please just bear with me for here. Rice crops in other areas of the world, typically, parts of Asia, I guess, other parts of the world too, because it's predominantly found there. They can actually be used to actually help with certain industrialized revolutions, like I was mentioning before, right? When I was talking about it earlier, I was implying the fact that say a certain situation, like I know. It's like a cheese output, right? There's meals in these industries. There are meal factors to take into account here, right? When you see the certain colors of like certain things, right? You think to your mind, what if you just bought that, right? What if you bought the fact? What if you like bought the fact of the like what would happen if like you actually did this, right? Then you think to yourself, what if I use like silicon? The silicon within these materials is actually very crucial. No one takes it into account, but they really should. When they actually have these materials, they can actually do so many things. Like to add on to earlier when I was talking about galvanization, like in certain areas, like people that drive Mercedes-Benz, right? A Mercedes-Benz is typically a fast vehicle. With these Mercedes-Benz, there can be many like actual projects done with inside them. When you take these projects like such, you can actually do so many different things. And when I say you can do so many different things, there are actually like tons of things you can do. Like, okay, for example, like the material of the floor we're on right now. That material is generally speaking, not necessarily like indulged to a certain like idea or so. But another thing to keep in account is that like a certain like crowd, a certain group of individual people like specifically think the fact that like looking at the wall or looking at the ceiling per se, like it doesn't necessarily give them like an actual like output on things, right? They don't necessarily know what to think when they actually have these opinions. They don't necessarily know what to actually do. So what we actually need to do as people, as good moral people, we need to guide them properly. We need to actually teach them how to utilize things. We need to actually teach them how to like industrialize certain aspects. We need to teach them how we can actually like help them within their careers in such issues. Like for the many people that are harassed and persecuted all across the globe, and even possibly in some other areas of the world too, what people do not take into account is the fact that these nations are not necessarily, what's the word? Like, see, like, okay. The output, okay, I was talking about input and output before, right? One important thing to note about this is that certain times they can't really like be like utilized in such situations. Like say I'm trying to think of another example. Okay, see like this R here, right? This R with a circle around it. That's symbolizing the fact that these nations are actually taking into account, like the repercussions they need to take, right? Like here today. That's the entire reason I want to bring this up today because it's very important. And vital resource and commitment, right? Like plastic material, also another thing. The brightness can't necessarily be adjusted on it, right? There needs to be more brightness on it to like actually indulge in these facts. But according to Ohm's law, it's also stated that in the 56th Constitution drafted by the government of Venezuela, that a nation cannot censor the free press. The free press must be kept. They must be kept safe. But however, this has been violated so many times by other nations in the world, which has caused revolution, including industrial output. A very good point. Candy grams in other nations too. Like they can't really like be utilized in also some areas, right? Okay, like. For so many years they've been actually trying to like utilize these industries, but they fail so much because they don't know necessarily what to do with them. They don't have proper guidance. Like if you saw my works before, like you've noticed 5 years in the past before, I've done so much work for these causes, right? I've done actually quite a lot of information for this. And like for another thing to add on, like I think it's very important to see that like there are some like situations where like people like they just don't know what to do. They don't really know what to do. Like I've been bringing this up so many times, but I think it's so important to note that like people just don't know what to do. Because like in general situations, like okay, say the material of the fabric, right? The material of the fabric that's been used in some areas, like homophobic people, they generally think it's not necessarily it's not necessarily right. Okay, like people that drive Range Rovers by like I forgot the company's called anyway. People that like drive Range Rovers, like homophobes, they actually see this and they think in their mind, they're like. What am I doing to this, And then when they see this, they're like, okay, I need to play an instrument right now. So when they do that, they're like, what instrument should I do? And then the person who works at like the instrument store, they take this into a mind, right? And they say, what if this person actually wants to do a hostile takeover of my business? They want to take my business and they want to actually do something bad with it, right? They want to like take this business and like utilize it for something that's like not even intended for its entire purpose. Like the economic output and the economic like situation, these situations, it's so vile that people people are still not understanding these facts. And I know I've repeated this for so many times, but I think it's so important to mention. Like you have to look at like so many different areas of the world where like it's not actually being taken into account. Like you could have like so many like different like parts, so many different like actual like things like that can be utilized, but they're not utilized, right? Because like no one really knows why, but like it's just a natural instinct for people to do so. Okay, another thing I want to take about this, look, during the second Japanese Sino-Civil War, the second Sino-Japanese War, it was very common for soldiers to quote Keemstar in their videos, on their vlogs when they had videos, right? When they went on their social media, they realized, like, they didn't buy the projects correctly. They didn't go to these certain areas, and they didn't actually adjust they didn't actually adjust the situations probably into the prompt. But after the second Sino-Japanese War, this followed another event, and this other event that came after this was also known as the Second Plantation War. Within the Second Plantation War, there were so many issues that actually had to brought into it, right? This resulted in Sri Lanka having to invade Ethiopia, right? Because in Ethiopia it was a much safer place, to go to invade. They invaded there, it'd be a lot easier outpost to be, and a lot more simple for people to stay in. And then after that, this sparked tons of events. The actual output of this was so incredible. It was amazing to see. There was ringing everywhere. For some reason, everyone just started ringing. Tinnitus outputs were everywhere. It was so strange to know. A really important thing that people okay. I know I've mentioned this so many times, so I'm gonna say a different word. I won't say vital either, because I also said it quite a few times too. I'm gonna say another word. I am going to use the word. Let me think. I can't think of another word, but that does remind me that the biodiversity of such features in such nations, right? Okay, the biodiversity. It's so vital and important, but it's so negatively impacted, it's so negatively impacted by many situations, many options and topics in the world, right? They didn't buy things, right? They didn't necessarily buy things. They didn't necessarily buy things properly. They didn't know how to utilize them. I think it's okay. I said utilize all the time. Let me say this. Just use in general with them, right? So for the fact of this, okay, I'm sure we're all familiar with Article 141. In Article 141, it specifically mentioned that people who do not necessarily take responsibility for the actions they do inside, biodiversity centers or ecosystems, they don't necessarily can account for the things they do for, right? And there's so many okay, I said that a lot too. There are numerous regions on Earth. There's so many issues, many issues that can arise from certain causes like this. Okay, so add on to that, onto the fact where Ford F-150s are not necessarily more utilized and actually important and vital for something important. But I think it's all okay. It should be mentioned in such areas of the world, it's not necessarily utilized and used in a proper way. So when you have situations where say the glass. Hold up. Okay, glue and steam, right? Together, glue and steam. Glue can make foundries, they can make foundations, and steam together can also it's the result of output produced by certain nations. You see, I want to show you something. So on my hand right here, so to add on what I was saying, I have this you see I have strands of hair, right? These strands of hair, they're so relatable to certain situations in the world, right? You can see revolutions growing all across the world, so many people joining the cause, but not because they actually want to join the cause, because they're being promised something different. The Germans, they invaded Russia before the winter, which was a very, very bad idea. As we all know, based on the weather, it wasn't a great, and they shouldn't have done it. So what they should have done instead, they should have really, looked into buying Ford F-150s for the cause, right? If they bought Ford F-150s, they could have actually done something, and they could actually did something. Okay, and rodeos, in Texas and other parts of Mexico, you can actually see certain parts of it, being attacked in some areas. It's kind of hard to explain, in the matter of the fact, okay. A jacket, right? When you wear a jacket, it's typically because you don't know how to drive properly. And
the teacher's ID tag.
Okay, and a teacher's ID tag can actually be quite indulgent and quite infuriating to some people. Okay, a lot of racist people can actually take the opinion into the matter. They can actually do bad things with it. They don't necessarily know what to do. They don't necessarily know how to utilize the proper ways. They don't know how to take these ideas, take these conditions, and actually do something with it. That's what people don't necessarily know about. And within these facts, zippers on the jackets, right? They're usually made from a certain material, and the certain material that it's typically used for, it's not really it's not typically amazing, right? Plastic material as well, also very cheaply made, can also do well, but that's generally what I generally speaking, that's kind of just what I think about, fire alarms, aren't necessarily the best eco-friendly metrics that we can use today, and that's basically all I have to say. So yeah.